Hello, and welcome to tonight's stream, where I'm going to be talking about continuing the development of the Visual Studio Code Extension that we started on last week. But I just want to start with a couple of housekeeping things. The first one is I want to give a shout out to Jeffrey Huntley on Twitter. Jeff popped into the stream last week, and as a result of that, he mentioned that I was using my microphone incorrectly. I know little to nothing about any sort of audio related stuff, and Jeffrey pointed out that I was talking into the mic incorrectly. So I'm going to read you what he told me. What he told me was that this Rode Podcaster, I have the Rode Podcaster, this is what this thing is I'm talking into right now, and he told me that this is a condenser shotgun microphone, and I should be talking directly into it. And what I was doing previously was I was talking into the side of it like this, and he told me it doesn't work like that. And he even went so far as to send me a picture of how I should be correctly talking into the microphone. So that's what I'm doing now, and hopefully the sound is improved. So if you could give me a thumbs up or a nod or a cheer of some sort of indication that the microphone is now working correctly, that would be appreciated. So that was a 1,000 times better. I like that. Thank you very much, Manfred. Yeah, who knew? So this is my naivety. I genuinely thought that anywhere on the microphone that's got these grills is where you could talk into, but that's clearly not how it works. So I'm going to continue talking directly into the microphone, just like this, and we shall see where we get to. So that was the first bit of housekeeping. The second bit of housekeeping that I wanted to mention was that on Friday, I'm going to attempt to start a new time slot for this stream. So currently, to date, I've been doing a Monday evening at 8 p.m. GMT, so that's where we are right now, and that's what we're talking about. I'm going to try Friday lunchtime as well. Now, that's mainly because I don't think I could get another evening off, if that makes sense. For those of you that are married or in a relationship, you'll probably know what I'm referring to there. So what I'm thinking about doing is a Friday lunchtime. So my lunchtime is between 12 and 1. So the intention is that I will be doing something on my Friday lunchtime. So rather than going out for a walk, which is what I normally do of a lunchtime, I will be sitting down and doing something. Now that something will likely be continuing with this Visual Studio Code extension that we have here, but maybe I'll be something else. So I'll aim to keep the I'll bring this up again. I'll aim to keep the let's bring this up. I shall aim to keep my live stream. I should have a live stream. I'll aim to keep the live stream section of this repository up to date with what I'm intending on talking about. That will it's obviously not up to date as of yet because I don't know what I'll be talking about on Friday, but the intention will be to continue that and keeping that up to date. Do the thing. Shouldn't you be eating? Well, yes, Patrick, I probably should be eating. But I'm going to give it a try. If it doesn't work, then I might find a different time slot. But I'm trying to work around work, obviously, and work around family. So the idea being Friday lunchtime at the minute is where I'm going to go on for. So hopefully you'll be able to join me for that. If not, you can always catch the recording. All the recordings are uploaded to YouTube. So feel free to catch it there as well. Hi, Paul, who's just joined in the chat room there. Glad to have you here. So, on to the more important stuff. So, where we got to last week was a We took the output from the Visual Studio Code Yeoman generator, and we had a working Visual Studio Code extension, so we can run this. So this code is exactly where we left it last week. So we can run this, and now if we walk up to here and we say clip img, then we should have a command that doesn't actually do anything. We can put it in here, but it just outputs it to the screen. And where we left it, because we ran out of time, was to could just stream. Well, I could just stream eating my lunch, Matthias, but I'm not sure if people would want to see that. I don't know. We should maybe give that a try. So where we didn't actually have anything. We hadn't actually started implementing any functionality. So the idea was that straight away we would continue active development of this to start looking at this. However, someone who's in the chat room has put a complete kibosh on that. Kim Nordmo, or Admiring Worm, in the chat room has introduced me to something which can only be described as a phenomenal, and I love that word, phenomenal. He has introduced me via the pull request mechanism in GitHub. He sent a pull request through for changing extension to make use of dependency injection instead of hard coding. Now, initially, I was like, what are you talking about? So in my normal .NET coding, I use dependency injection or inversion of control quite regularly. So whether it's simple injector, which is what I tend to use on the chocolatey side of things, or whether it's autofac, which is what's used in Cake, I'm fairly familiar with the concept of dependency injection and why you would want to use it. But in a JavaScript environment, or in this case a TypeScript environment, I was like, what? Because I genuinely didn't know that you. Well, that's a slight lie. I think I did know at the back of my head. I'd seen it somewhere in my mind. But Kim put together this pull request, which you can see by my reaction, I was quite impressed with it. Right. So since creating this pull request, I have actually implemented what Kim has suggested in 2 of the other extensions that I have. So in the Cake Recipe VSCode extension and the CI/CD Assets Visual Studio Code extension, I've implemented this. So what is this? What we're talking about here is a library called InversifyJS. So InversifyJS is, I'll let the website explain it exactly what it is in terms of how they want to be known, but it's a powerful and lightweight inversion of control container for JavaScript and Node.js apps powered by TypeScript. And if you go to their website, it's quite a nice website that gives you a lot more information. So I was like, well, really, what do I want this in my code base? And the answer is yes. I think I do want it in my code base, and the reason that I want it in my code base is because it makes things a lot simpler. So it brings simplicity in the sense that it breaks everything into concrete units of work, and those concrete units of work are the things that you'll inject your containers, your dependencies into. It does add a little bit of complexity in the sense of you have to inject information into those. I want to say objects, but it's not really. It brings a little bit of complexity because you have to inject them into the classes that you're creating. But the end result is something that's a lot easier to understand. Now I can show you that a little bit. So if I go over to one of the other extensions that I created, so CI/CD Assets is probably a good example of that, right? So if we go back in time a little bit and we look at how I was doing things, so that was probably around, let's go back in time to here. So let's browse at this point in time. So the way that I was doing things, if I browse files here, then we look into the source, then I had, it wasn't the best way of doing things, let's be honest. I had a single file that was extension.ts, and in this single file, I had literally everything that I was doing within that extension. So I had all of the commands for downloading every single file that the CI/CD assets VSCode Extension was a single function, and those single functions were all in this one big extension.ts file. So there's a little bit of duplication here. There's a maintainability problem here, in the sense that if I were to add more commands into this, then this file was just going to grow and grow and grow and grow. Now, obviously, that could have been split up quite easily without the need to add something like an inversion of control container, but it's something that naturally fits for that as well. So that's how I was doing things. And now if I look at the code base just now for the CI/CD assets extension, and now look in source, so rather than having a single file that had everything in it, there's now this concept of a command. So rather than them all being in one file, it's now split up nicely into a concrete piece of work. So for example, the appvar command. So then the appvar command, we have a natural segregation of these are this little bit of code, this kind of 10 or 15 lines of code is doing one thing and one thing only. And that one thing is to download that appvar file. So in order to make that happen, I need to have access to the file system because I need to save the file to the file system. I need to have access to the configuration that's being passed in so I can check to see the URL that I'm downloading from. So all of those things are now external, right? So all of those things are now handled in this thing that I'm referring to as a service. So that service handles the file system abstraction. It handles the configuration abstraction. It handles the messaging to and from the user. So all of those things are handled out with in separate classes. And then in here, you're limiting the scope of the work to what you're actually trying to achieve. So it makes it much easier to maintain going forward. So all of this is possible thanks to this InversifyJS library that Kim introduced me to. So the sort of the complexity that comes in is here. So InversifyJS has uses the concept of constructor injection. So when you're instantiating the class, you specify what are the dependencies on that class. So for this example, I need to have access to this thing that I've called the message service, the file system service, the network service, and the configuration service. So for this command, I need to have those things in order to perform the function that I'm trying to perform. The nice thing about this, and the way that it's led, the way that it's built up, is actually how everything's instantiated. So what I've showed you here is the individual command. But if I go back to where I had my extension.ts, which is here, before it was one massive file. Now it's 9 lines of code. And that 9 lines of code is now instantiating all of those individual commands. So what we're saying here in this export function, which is the activate, I'm getting an instance of this thing called command manager, which again comes from the container, and then I'm saying register the commands. So all I've had to do is it will call one command, which will then find all of the commands in the project and then instantiate them and make them available, ready for execution. So if I add a new command, all I have to do is add a new command class, a new command.ts file, and it will automatically kind of work, right? So it's a really, really nice way of building up the project. And this is all, like I say, this is all thanks to Kim, who put this out there in the first place. So what I want to do is I want to bring this PR into where we are right now. So rather than going off and hard coding a bunch of stuff and kind of doing things in what will ultimately lead to a harder to maintain code base, what we're going to do is we're going to pull in Kim's change, which is to bring in that Inversify.js library, right? So where we are right now, so literally where I left things last week, if I go up to here and look at clip image, which is where we are here. Okay, so I'll come back to that in a sec. So right now, if I do git status here, then we have some changes, and those changes were where I was starting to build up that command and so those were uncommitted changes that I hadn't committed to source control yet. So Kim's PR is from the current commit that's committed into the repository. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of all this stuff. So I'm going to reset this so we can come back to this later. The comment that Kim's made in the chat room there is that the commands still need to be added to the project.json file. Yes, that's correct. So what Kim's referring to there is, we spoke about this last week in the stream, but in the package.json file, when you define a command, and the command in this sense is the command palette. So if I'm trying to add something into there, which is what we're doing as part of this extension, you do need to define that within the package.json file. So in order for it to work, in order for that command to work and be available in this new InversifyJS language, or library rather, we will need to define it once here. We'll need to define the actual command class, but after you've done those two things, then everything else that will flow through, it will just become available. Okay. Kim did mention whether we might be able to have at some point the creation of dynamic commands. I don't think that exists yet. I think you looked into that, Kim, to see whether that was possible or not. But yeah, I mean, that's a nice to have, I think. Everything I've spoken about to date doesn't detract from any of that. The ability to have kind of logical chunks of work contained within a single class and then injecting your dependencies into it still makes a lot of sense in my head. So where we are right now is I have a clean. I wonder if you could code. Okay, so we're not going down that route just now, Matthias. No, probably we probably could, but we're not. We're just talking about at this point using Inversify.js. We're not talking about using code generation at this point. That's maybe for another stream. Okay, so we've got a clean we've got a clean repository here. So what I want to do is I want to pull down the changes that my goodness. I want to pull down the changes that Kim has suggested. I want to have a look at it, make sure that it's working the way we expect it to. We'll look through the code and then we'll pull it in. So what we're going to do is we're going to git fetch origin, and then the PR in question was number 3. So let's just pull in number 3's head and then pull it into a branch called PR3. Okay, and then we'll check out that branch. Git check out PR3. So now if we go back to Visual Studio Code, now we should have all the changes that Kim has suggested in this PR. So let's have a look and see what's going on here. So what we spoke about before, so we're using this concept of a command manager class, and that command manager is going to be responsible for registering all the commands that we have. So right now in this code base, we only have a single command, but that's fine. So Kim's then went into, so this is the command manager. So what we're doing here is command manager has the concept of injecting multiple instances of a single interface, in this case an iCommand interface. So what Kim has brought in is the concept of an interface. So an interface in .NET parlance is a well-known defined thing. So it's essentially a contract that you say that anything that implements this interface has to implement these methods or these properties or these whatevers, right? So in TypeScript, you can do the same thing. So you can define an interface. In this case, we've got an iCommand interface. And that iCommand interface has 2 things on it. It's got an ID, which is a string, and then it's got an execute function, which is what the command is going to do when it's actually triggered. So in the command manager, what we're saying here is that into this thing that is command manager, when it's instantiated, go ahead and find all of the iCommand types, the interfaces, all the things that are registered within the container that are of type iCommand, and pass them into this command manager, right? So then they have a function in here called register commands, and that's what's called from the activate function, and it's saying go ahead and loop through all those commands that are passed in, and then call the register command on this extension. So what we're essentially saying, this is the work that I was hand coded. So if we go back to where I was looking at the code base before, which was in here, then this, where I had multiple definition, multiple commands, I was having to do each one of those individually. Every time I added a new command, I had to add a new one in here. So this code that Kim's suggesting is that we'll just do that in a for loop, because we now have that information. We know about all the commands, so all we need to do is call the register command on there, and then subscribe to that command, ready for knowing when it's going to be called, right? So the way that this is all tied together is there's this InversifyConfig.ts file. Now, in here, this is where we kind of glue everything together. So that when you use an IOC container, then this is a fairly standard file. So this is you saying, these are all the things that I'm putting into my container, and this is how they're related, right? So in this example on line 12 here, we're saying that this thing called the hello world command is of type command, i.e. that I command interface that we've defined, so that that's how it knows that everything that is an I command is one of the, or rather, this thing that is my command is of type I command, so that when the command manager says, give me all the I commands, that's where I then get the reference to this thing called hello world. And that's pretty much it, right? So if we imagine where we were before. So before I was hitting F5 and we saw the hello world command appear. The exact same thing should happen, but it won't. And I know why. And I'll tell you for why. So what the other part of this pull request that Kim put through was he added 2 new dependencies into this package.json file. So those are things that need to be shipped as part of the package that we ultimately deploy to the Visual Studio Code Marketplace. So those things are the InversifyJS library and this other one called Reflect Metadata. Now, because I've just pulled that PR down from GitHub, we haven't actually run an NPM install yet to pull those dependencies down into my machine. So now if I do an NPM install, those dependencies should be fetched, and at that point we should be able to run the code. So let's see that coming down, which it did. If we go back to Visual Studio Code, which is now over here, all of those problems have gone away, and if we hit F5, then we should be back to the exact same place we were, which was clipimg command should hopefully be here. No, it's not called clipimg because that was one of the changes that we made. So it's called hello world. So there's a hello world command that all it's saying is hello get13 stream. So that's where we were at the end of the last stream before we started tinkering with it a little bit. So this to me is just amazing, and I've said thank you to Kim multiple times on private chat on Gitter and various places. But I personally think this is amazing. So I have already implemented this on 2 of my extensions, as I mentioned before. I'm implementing it here, and I will be putting it into the Chocolatey extension that I'm working on as well. Because I think it's a great way of building the project up, making it simple to add new commands into. So this is definitely going to be the way forward, right? So the only slight thing that I'm going to change, and this is purely me being a little bit OCD about certain things, the terminology that Kim's using here is he's used the terminology of a message handler, and that's fine. I'm not going to say that that's wrong. I prefer to think of these things as services as opposed to handlers. So I will make a slight change to the PR, or rather, I will make a slight change once I pull the PR in, just because of my own way of thinking about these things. But aside from that, I think this is a great PR, and we're going to go ahead and pull it in. So the way that so Kim's just saying in the chat room there that he couldn't think of anything better, and like I say, that's not a problem. In terms of functionality, in terms of the way it works, it's great. I think of these things as services, and that's kind of the terminology that I use in .NET projects when I do the same thing. So with that said, I'm not going to make any changes to the PR locally. I just want to go up here, and I want to go ahead and say, let's just pull this in as is. So I'm going to go up to GitHub and I'm going to say that this looks great. So we're just going to go ahead and get this pulled in. So we'll submit that as a review and we'll get that pulled in. Now, the only thing was that there wasn't... So Kim, when he first did this, he submitted it as a... this was his first time using it, and this was my first time seeing it. Kim actually added this as a draft pull request on GitHub with the intention of it never actually being pulled in. But I liked it so much that I convinced them it would be a good idea to make it a non-draft PR. But as a result of that, there wasn't an issue created for this. So again, because I'm slightly OCD about these things, so let's go ahead and create an issue so that we can capture this. So I'm going to say switch to using InversifyJS for IOC. And I'm going to say that we're going to label that as a... Now, we'll come back to that. We're not going to label yet. I'll come back to that and I'll explain why in a bit. So let's just go ahead and do this. So the PR in question is now going to be associated with that one. So let's go ahead and just kind of hook those two things together. So that relates to number 5, just as a comment there. So there's some tracking. Now, ideally, these commits would have been assigned to that PR as part of the commit messages, just so that we can close the loop on the commits that goes into it. But I mean, that's fine. I mean, we can work with what we have got just now. So I'm going to go ahead and merge this in. So let's just go ahead and get this pulled in. And because I normally always do this, I will just do this as well. So PR, thank you. And I'll just do thank you very much. Okay, so we can go back to this one, and this issue is now essentially closed. But this is the one that we'll use for when we come around to generating release notes and things. So with that done, I should be able to switch back to here and check out the develop branch. And then if I do a git fetch origin, and then do a git rebase of origin develop, we should be all up to date with so cool. There's limits to... Oh, I don't know about that, Matthias. It just would have been a little bit much, I think, to go back and rebase all of those commits to have the issue in the title of the message. Maybe 5-second delay, it seems, according to emails. Now I know. Sure. Is that how long it took for me clicking the button to seeing that email come through? Okay. Okay, but yeah, in terms of limits to my OCD, maybe let's not push the bounds on that. Let's just stick with what we've got there. So with that pulled in, we should now be in the exact same place as we were before, but we're just now on the develop branch. So I'm going to make a slight change, and that slight change, like I said, is just to rename this slightly. And I just want to check one thing on so that I've got my naming conventions right. So if I go over to CI/CD assets and look up here, I have kept it as hyphenated, but then internal to that, I've called it the message service. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to rename this as service, and then in here, we're going to call this update the imports for moved. Yes, let's do that. So hopefully VSCode has updated that. And then if we go in here, I'm going to call this service. So it's updated where it was used in some places, maybe, but in others it didn't. So let's call this now the message service. And then let's go ahead and copy that and put this down here and in here. And then I want to rename this. Can I do a rename symbol? Yes, I think we can. So let's call this message service. That'll update it there. message. Oh, so it replaced it there, which was good. And then in here, we're going to call this message service, message service, message service. So that's now going to fail because we need to update it in the types definition. So that's over here. And then this is going to become message service, and that's going to become message service. And then a quick check to see if there are any more handler references. There aren't. So with that done, hello command is erroring because that paste didn't work. Okay. Message service. So if we go ahead and run that again, we should have no difference other than it now still says get 13 stream, but it's now got message service rather than message handler. So that's just purely for my own sanity. So this one we can link to the issue that we created, which was number 5, not 55. Slight refactor of class name. We're going to go from message handler to message service. Okay, let's go ahead and commit that. Sure. And let's go ahead and push that up as well. So git push origin. So the other thing that should be happening in the background, because we set this up last week, was we should have our CI build running. So every time we're pushing those commits into GitHub, it will be firing a webhook over, and that webhook will be triggering a build, which is what's happening here. So it's got the commit message and everything. I'm forgetting to speak directly into... Oh, am I? Oh, man. This is maybe not in the right place for where I need it to be. I might have to play with it. So you can tell a difference. So you can hear audibly when I'm not talking directly into the mic. Is that correct? Because if it is, I'm going to have to be conscious of that, I think. Okay, so that build should continue and it should succeed. Man, that's okay. I might have to tinker with the position of the old microphone in terms of how I look at the screen, or rather where I look on the screen, so that I'm lined up correctly at the point of talking. Okay. Red text in the CI build is completely fine. That's just NPM outputting to the standard error stream rather than the standard output stream. So the get red text in the CI build and app there, it's nothing to worry about, honestly. Trust me. I've seen it before. Okay. So, with that done, the one other thing related to CI that I want to talk about is there's a couple of things. Today I learned red text. No, don't quote me on that, Manfred. Manfred, that's not strictly true. I will rewind the video and requote what I said in this one specific context where it is NPM outputting on appvar. Red text is absolutely fine, but in other circumstances it's bad. So let's behave. So let's tidy up here a little bit. So this issue that I created was for creating a scaffolded project. We did that, so let's go ahead and close that issue out. And I'll mention some of the other issues I added here. So I opened an issue specifically for making use of a new cake recipe package that I created. No, I'm not even going to look at the chat anymore for a second. Or have I done this already? Oh, maybe I've done this already. Did I do this one already? I might have done. Did we? I've forgotten where we got to with this. Let's have a look at recipe.cake. We are making use of that, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to say that we've done that one. So we've done that one, which was making use of the cake VS Code recipe. We've done that. Yes, this one. So currently, what we implemented last week was making use of and something else that Kim put forward another extension. So Kim also put together a set of chocolatey scripts for making it possible to install a embedded v6 file into Visual Studio Code without needing to download it first from the internet or from the marketplace. And so that makes use of this install VSCode Extension.ps1 file and then this uninstall VSCode Extension.ps1 file. So what happened was, if we go over to chocolate.org and we look for, I forget, did I put it in the name of the package? I did. That's right there. Let's just click on that. So someone else who's actually in the chat room tonight, Pascal, took, I think I'm right in saying he took that those scripts that Kim created or Kim made use of, and he's wrapped them now into an extension package on Chocolatey. So what that means is, rather than shipping those scripts in every single extension that I have, so right now there are those two scripts, I have to ship them within every single VS Code extension that I create. Extensions being used here, multiple different places, but they actually mean different things. So previously in my 4 Visual Studio Code extensions, I would have had these 2 scripts in each of those packages. Now, the problem with that is that if something changes or there's a bug, I would then need to go back and update each of those extension scripts so that it would fix those bugs. Now, what Pascal did is he wrapped that up into a Chocolatey extension package, meaning that those 2 scripts only live in one place now, and that's the extension package. And I can take a dependency on that extension package and then have those same functions available to me. So at some point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to using this extension package for the actual installation of the package when using Chocolatey, rather than having them embedded within the package itself. So that's what that issue is. So I'll do that at some point. That's not what we're going to do. That's not what we're going to do today. The one that I'm going to do today is I'm going to add dependabot into the mix. So we spoke about this briefly, I think, last week. Add dependabot onto project. So dependabot is it's an amazing service. Dependabot will essentially monitor your repository, and it will tell you if there are any dependencies that you have defined within your package.json file, and it will tell you if any of those extensions have become out of date. And when that happens, it will automatically send a PR into your repository to implement that suggested change. So if I go up over to CI/CD assets, then we'll actually see that this morning there were 2 pull requests created by dependabot for the CI/CD assets extension that I've also been working on. So what this is suggesting is that I should change the package.json file to have rather than using the 5.12.1 version of TSLint, I should be using the newly created 5.13. Excuse me. Now, so if I didn't have dependabot, in all honesty, I would probably never even have known that TSLint had a new version. Now, then you get into an argument of, well, should you update that dependency? Now, what dependabot tries to give you is it tries to give you a compatibility number here that indicates how successful this merge is likely to be. Now, assuming that all of these packages are following semantic versioning, that's a bit of a leap. It's a bit of a leap. I'll come back to that question in a second, Manfred. So assuming that Yes, exactly. So assuming that those packages are following semantic versioning, then in this scenario, I'm going from 5.12 to 5.13. So that's a minor patch version increment. So in theory, there should be no breaking changes at that point. The only thing that should have been added there was new functionality that had no adverse effect on any previous on anything previous. Now that's a bit of a leap. But that's why we have CI, and that's why we kind of want to have these things being tested and being built via PRs. Now, you can, and this kind of leads into the question that Manfred's asking in the chat room, is can you tell dependabot to only perform action, create PRs, if it's a minor version change? The short answer is I think you can. But what you definitely can do is, if I expand this dependabot options command and options, you can actually tell dependabot not to do certain things. So, for example, if you knew that, so it's right here actually, you can tell dependabot to ignore this patch minor version. Will close the PR and stop dependabot creating any more for this minor major version unless you reopen the PR and upgrade it yourself. So basically what can happen within the PR itself is you can actually give the dependabot, the bot that's running in the cloud somewhere, commands to either update the PR, ignore the PR, close the PR, what labels to use, what milestones to use, all that sort of stuff. So it's quite flexible in what you can do. I've got it set up. I've got it set up so that it doesn't automatically merge, but I'm fairly sure that you can get dependabot to automatically merge as well. For me, that's a step too far. But what we want to do is I want to set up dependabot on this new Visual Studio Code extension that I have set up here. So the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to go over to here and let's just close off some of these and see where we get to. So dependabot can be driven by logging into the website and defining the project setup, how you want it to run and how you want it to execute. I'm a fan of doing as much configuration based on files in my repository as possible, because that way I can see things changing over time. So what I added into the CI/CD assets extension that I have recently was a dependabot configuration file. So this again is my dependabot configuration file. That's how I've set it up. You could set this up to be however you want it to be. But what this is going to do is it's going to give me this config.yaml file, which specifies that I'm interested in the JavaScript package manager. So dependabot has the concept of languages, and it understands multiple different languages. So there's a .NET one, there's a Ruby one, there's various other ones in there. But the one I'm interested in is JavaScript, because that will specifically trigger on this package.json file. I want it to update on a daily basis, so it's going to scan my repository daily to see if there are any new changes that are coming down the pipeline. You can change that to a more relaxed schedule. I think it's weekly. But you also have it happening in near real time. That's a little bit excessive for what I'm trying to do. I specify, because I use Git flow, I'm specifying that the target branch is develop. And then I've set up here people who get assigned, so just me, as reviewers and assignees to the PRs that are created. And I've got it set up with a default label that it gets added when it creates that PR of dependabot. So we'll see that in this PR that was over here. Then it's assigned me as a reviewer, and it's assigned me to actually do something with it. But if there's more people on the project, then you can obviously have those being assigned and requesting reviews on other people. And the label that here it's being created is one called dependabot. Okay. So with that in place, I should, in theory, be able to. I do have to still add the project into dependabot, but now that I've configured everything, it should pick up the configuration from this config.yaml file. However, so Kim's saying there, you cannot tell dependabot to only update minor and patch releases. However, you can tell it to only do security updates. Interesting. So that's an interesting one. So the other thing that did happen recently is if I go over to pull requests and I go to closed, then dependabot actually makes a distinction between so these ones up here that dependabot created were kind of regular version bumps, but these ones that created here were specifically due to identified security issues, and this is really where dependabot shines. So these ones up here, you could probably argue that these are nice to have bumps. So these are bumping to a new version of something that's not strictly needed, but it's a nice to have. Whereas these ones, these were specifically identified as security vulnerabilities that were found in those underlying libraries. So these ones are definitely more important to pull through as quickly as possible. So I think what Kim's saying there is that you cannot tell dependabot to only update minor in patch releases. However, you can tell it to only do security updates. So following that through, what would happen was that these two pull requests would have been created by dependabot, but these other ones wouldn't. Okay, and for me, I'm quite happy to, or rather, I like to know that the when my dependencies are out of date, and I typically, unless there's a break in my pull request, or a break in the a failure of the build as a result of the PR, I typically pull it through anyway. Now, I was having a chat with Kim the other day actually regarding that process and potentially how it might mean that a specific version of Visual Studio Code would be required for my extension going forward. And like I said, I think that's okay because Visual Studio Code tends to update automatically, and I tend to have things. I tend to always install the most recent, and I know not everyone does that, but I think I'm okay with that. So just something to bear in mind. Dependabot is a very, very useful service, but it's obviously something you need to use with a little bit of caution, just to know that what you're pulling in, whether you actually need it or whether it's actually going to have an impact on what you're trying to do. So, with all of that being said, if I walk over to dependabot, this one, dependabot.com, I shall probably need to log in, but hopefully I'm signed into GitHub. So dependabot is linked to GitHub, so if you're signed into GitHub, you're signed into dependabot. So I want to add a repo here. Now, in order to do that, I will have to, so at the minute it's telling me that I've added all my repos. That's not true. So let's put it in context. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 projects in dependabot at the minute, but I have something like 300 repos on GitHub, so they're not all added. But what you can do is you can limit how many repos dependabot knows about, and that's what it's telling me here. So I'm going to need to say I need to grant access to that. Okay, I'm going to come back in a second. I'm just going to go and put my password in here, so I'm going to be right back. Okay, so I put my password in. So what I need to do, so at the minute I've limited those repositories, only those 4 repositories, into dependabot. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to, that's right there actually. So clipimg VSCode. I'm going to add that one in. I'm going to hit save. So now over here in dependabot, if I, let's just refresh this. If I now click on add repos again, it should be able to see that new clipimg one that I've just added, which I did. And I'm going to, alternatively, you can configure dependabot. Okay, so it's, maybe I should do that. Let's do that first then, because it hasn't found it. So it hasn't found that config.yaml file because I haven't checked it in yet. So let's go back and get that added in. So this is issue 6. So there's me added that config file. So I'm just going to say 6 add dependabot config file. Go ahead and commit that. And let's just get that pushed up. Git push origin. And now when we go ahead and attempt to add the project into dependabot.com, it should now be able to find that YAML file. So let's do that again. So we're over here on dependabot, and we're going to say add repos. 300 repos and no control. Sure. That's not actually what I want to do. Where am I going? I want to say add repos. Interesting. Why is it lost? Is it already added it? Oh, it did add it. Interesting. Okay, so now it's got it. Okay, but it's found it. So let's just see if that link's worked. It has. Okay, cool. So even though I stopped the addition, it kind of pulled it through anyway. But anyway, so clip image VSCode is now hooked up, and it's currently checking to see if any of the dependencies that I currently have are out of date. So what we might find coming through as we're doing this stream now is that it should have. It might actually create PRs as we're going through this. So let's just close off some of these tabs so that we can not have quite as many open just now. So we can close that. That's my configuration. And like I say, what we may find is that it will open PRs for us as we are doing some coding. So let's just check to see that there aren't any already. And there are. Okay, so it has. So it's currently found that at least one of the things that I have in my package.json file is essentially out of date. And it's making a suggestion that we should bump this one. So this is the kind of one that Manfred was talking about, that you may want to err on the side of caution. So what it's saying there is it wants to bump the type definitions for Node from 10.12 to 11. So regardless of what package it is, you're bumping from as a major version bump. So that's something that you'd want to not kind of walk into blindly. You'd probably want to check to see what's going on there. This is the type definitions for Node. So it's not something that ships with your project. It's something that is a developer dependency. So this one by itself is not a huge concern, but the fact that it's a major version bump is something that you would want to look at and address. And actually it's now created. Okay, so it's gone a little bit crazy, but you'll see why dependabot is entirely useful. So you end up with these you'll end up with PRs that you can then pull in and merge. Now the wonderful thing about dependabot is that it will actually rebase those PRs. So if I were to go ahead and merge one of these PRs, then if it were no longer able to automatically merge one of the other ones, dependabot would actually then update the PR, rebasing upon the current head of the develop branch, and regenerate the PR, essentially bring it up to date and remove those merge conflicts. So is that something we should? I kind of want to show you this in action now. So this one is a small change. So TS-lint has been bumped from. So I'm going to say that's got a 98% compatibility. I'm going to say that this is great, right? The following labels could not be found. Okay, dependabot is telling me there that in my configuration, I have specified that I want that dependabot label to be assigned, but it hasn't been able to find it. Okay, so maybe I should just fix that. Okay, so this is one of the things that is... I have a problem, and that problem is labels on repositories. So the default repository, when you create a repository on GitHub, you get these default labels, and they have bug, duplicate, enhancement, good first issue, and all of them are great, but they're not exactly the way I want them to be. So what I could do, and what I have done in the past, is I could yes, Manfred, my OCD is kicking in again. So what I have done in the past is I could go into here and I could modify each of them to be the way I want them to be, and I have done that in the past. But it's now gotten to the point where I've kind of fixed that, and I've made it so that I have a script that I can run. So if I were to go up to here and run my build.ps1 with a target of labels, target equals label or labels. Is it labels? I think it's labels. Then it will automatically change those to be the way I want them to be. So let's just do this while I can. But this is probably going to fail, and this will fail because in order for that to work, I need an environment variable. I need an environment variable to be set. So this is actually going to fail because it's not going to be able to access that repository. Yeah, unable to use Git Release Manager as a necessary credential are not available. So I need to add a environment variable to this machine so that I can allow that to happen. Now that's obviously not something that I'm going to show on my screen. So I'm going to say, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do this while we're here. So let's go into System and let's look for environment variables, and we can add in a new environment variable. And I shall switch to my Be Right Back screen, and I will add these in, and then we'll rerun that command so that we can add those labels in. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so in theory, I should now have some environment variables that will mean that I can do what I need to do. So if I go back into my repository here, which was clipimg VSCode, and I run that build script again, so build.ps1 with the target of labels, then it should now be able to run that Git Release Manager to recreate those labels on that repository. Now, what Kim's mentioned in the chat room there is absolutely true. So there's another system that you can use called Probot. So Probot is another bot in the cloud somewhere doing some stuff, and Probot has the ability now to do exactly what I'm doing here with the usage of Git Release Manager. So it's definitely something that can be done. I haven't looked into setting up Probot yet, because what it does mean is it means putting your configuration and directly for the labels directly into the GitHub repository. And I haven't quite got to that level with these settings yet. It's something I might look into still. But for now, what I've got is this system. So now if I refresh this page will now be refreshed with the exact issues that I want. So they're more or less exactly the same, but at least this way there's a consistent color, there's a consistent I like to uppercase the first letter. It's like I say, it's a complete OCD, but this is a big B bug rather than a little b bug. The other two I've kept as lowercase because those are the ones that are triggered or used by systems like I forget what it's called now, but there are services that will inspect GitHub repositories for specifically named labels to see whether people can make contributions for their first contributions to GitHub. So I kept those the same in case they're triggered in a case-sensitive way. So that's why I've left those two in there. Now the one that I haven't got in here, as you'll see, is the dependabot label, which is where we came from. The reason that I haven't done that yet is because I haven't updated that command to include that one yet, because that's a relatively new one into this system that is my labels. But if I go over to this one, so this one I will add in manually. So I'm going to click edit here, and I'm just going to pull this across into labels. I'm going new label, and I'm going to give that a name, and I'm going to have the description the same. And I'm going to have the color the same as well. So let's pull this across, copy, and then put this into here, create label. So now in those PRs, it will be able to correctly assign that label to that PR. So again, we see here that AppVeyor passed all those builds. So while we've been doing all of that stuff, AppVeyor has run those PRs through the CI system. They all passed. So I'm going to go ahead and say, this looks good to me, and let's get it pulled in. Looks good to me, and then approve, and then say submit review, and then I can go ahead and click merge pull request, and with that done, let's just delete it, and then if it needs to, if it's no longer able to merge those PRs, it's happening here, look. So dependabot has then updated this issue to indicate that it's currently rebasing this PR. So it's then identified that there's an incompatibility, so it's no longer able to merge this without resolving that merge conflict. It's now, behind the scenes, rebasing that PR on the head of the current develop branch, and it'll then update this PR with a new valid PR that will then work. Now, the one slight problem with dependabot is that all of these PRs are targeting the package.json file, or the package and the package lock.json file. So in doing one PR or merging one PR, almost all of these will hover over. So dependabot is rebasing, dependabot is rebasing, dependabot is rebasing. So it's going to get to a point where these 4 PRs are now valid, and then I'll do this one, and then these 3 PRs are then going to kick in to then do another rebase, and so on until they're all merged. That's a little bit of churn, especially if you've got a CI system. Dependabot has an open issue with regard to grouping of PRs together. So if you have a collection of dependencies that if one changes, the other one will need to be included in that. What you can actually do is you can actually group PRs together. So there's going to be an additional command in here that's going to allow you to say group this PR with the other one. So again, it can rationalize those, and it'll remember that for future PRs. So that's coming down the pipeline. It's not there yet. So like I say, for now, it does cause a little bit of churn. But I personally think that churn is worthwhile because it's picking up on those security vulnerabilities, and it's identifying that these things are required to be bumped. It saves you a lot of time, and it's definitely worth it. So what Kim's saying there is, which is a good case to have Mergify. So that's another system that we haven't spoken about yet, but it's something I do use to have Mergify automatically merge a PR when there's a one proved and one CI pass. So yes, so what you can do with another system called Mergify is say if there is an approval and it passes the CI checks, you can have Mergify automatically merge that PR for you. So rather than having me sitting, going through this and having to wait for those PRs to be updated, what you can do with Mergify is say, if this PR gets approved, i.e. I've gone in here and I've said approved, and it's also got valid checks, then merge it, right? So Mergify is one I'm still playing with. I have a little bit of, do I trust that or do I not? I think in this scenario, which is what Kim's getting at, is that if you have that level of trust, which is with regard to those, if your CI system is working the way you want it to, and you approved it and you kind of knowingly said, I'm okay with this one, then having that automatically happen in the background is definitely something to look into. So I haven't quite bit the bullet on that one yet. I'm manually merging those PRs once I've approved them. But that's definitely something to look into. Okay? So anyway, all of this is CI stuff. It's not really important for what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is we want to get to a point where we've got something that we can can you? Okay, so Kim's saying as well, you can also tell it to only automatically merge from certain users. So obviously you might not want to automatically merge a PR from Bob from off the street. So what Kim's saying there is that you can automatically merge for certain users. So that's definitely something that would be useful as well. But anyway, where we got to the tail end of last week, we got to a point where we were thinking about pulling some input from the user, and that input was going to be the alt text for the image that we're pasting in. So for anyone that doesn't know, so what we're trying to achieve here in this extension is I want the ability to grab the bits and bytes from the clipboard for when I create an image, and I want to be able to paste that, or rather take the bits and bytes from that clipboard, send that up to Azure Blob Storage, and then get the URL back from Azure Blob Storage and put it into my current window with the URL and the alt text for what I've defined. So where we got to last week was I wanted to be able to get the input from the user. So previously, we had the concept of just using the show input box directly. So right now, we've got the concept of a message service, and that message service is going to handle the I/O interactions between the user. So in the message service that Kim created for us, he has a show information message, but we need to be able to get input from the user as well. So if I go over to CI/CD asset code, and I look at the one that I've changed over. So I extended the message service that Kim created to provide some additional stuff. So maybe let's not use, was it CI/CD assets that I did most recently? I don't think it was. Let's go back a step and let's have a look at the other one, cake recipe. Cake recipe is the one I think I've been playing with more. So this one has a message service, but that message service has, yes, this one. So this is just extending what Kim gave us. So this is just adding in a few more functions here. So Kim's one had just a show information, so that's what we're using to date. I've added in another one which is show warning, so it's the exact same thing, it just renders it slightly differently. This one here is for prompting the user for a question, to answer a question as a result. So let's say we want something to happen and we want them to say that that's okay. That's what the show question's for. Show error, again, exactly the same. It's just rendering slightly different, so it's got a red exclamation mark rather than a yellow one. And then this one is show input. So this is me getting input from the user and making it available to them. So with this show input, I should now be able to say, and let's just see how we can make use of that. So over here, show input, we make use of that here. So let's borrow this part. So we're going to say show input. So we want to say that let the alt text be equal to, that's going to complain because it wants this to be asynchronous. So let's do that. And then show input. And we're just going to give it a title here, which is going to be provide alt text for image. And that's then going to be here. And what's it complaining about? Value string placeholder and that must be the default value. So the default value in this case is I'm not going to know what that is. And then what we're going to do here is rather than output that, let's just see that this is working. So this is going to be alt text is what we're outputting. So here, all we've done, we haven't renamed this command yet. That part we can do later. Let's just try and get something working. So what this should hopefully do for us is provide a input box where we can write in what we want as the alt text. So we're going to say provide alt text. This is a test. And we hit enter, then okay, so that part's working. So we're grabbing the input from the user and we are outputting it to the to the show information. So that's getting back to where we were last week. What we were starting to speak about last week was, well, how do I take what I've been given and put it onto the text editor? How do I add that text into the current text document that's open on my screen, right? So I did a little bit of digging after that, and I found that we can do this. So we can say, let me just bring it up again. Editor, there we go. Okay, so we can say let editor equal the VSCode.window. Now that's not going to work because we're going to need the VS Code in here, which is fine. So if we go up to here and borrow this line, copy this as an import into here. VSCode.window.active text editor. So active text editor is what it pretty much what it says it is. Kim is suggesting provide description for image. Could be. Let's provide description. Okay, that's quite annoying. Description for image. The reason that happens from time to time, by the way, is I'm making life difficult for myself. On this screen that you guys and girls are looking at, this is me on my Windows machine, on a VM on my Windows machine, but I'm actually running my keyboard and mouse through my Mac. So I'm then using an application called Synergy to take the keyboard and mouse input from my Mac and putting it over onto the keyboard and input on my Windows machine, which is then passing that through to the VM running on that Windows machine. And every so often it gets a little bit upset and it duplicates some of my keyboard presses. So it's not the fact that I wrote the C character lots of times. It's just that for some reason Synergy took it upon itself to put lots of them on the screen, and I haven't quite figured out what's going on there. Anyway, so if the editor, or rather if not editor, then let's just go ahead and return. So if we don't have an active document window, let's just quickly return and say, actually, no, we haven't got anything that we can work with there. But instead, let's have this concept of a selection. So let selection equal editor dot selection. So that's going to give me the currently selected value. And we can maybe do something with that. So that's something we can play with. The other thing that we want to do is we might want to play with, and we'll just put this here so that we can let selected text equal to editor.document.getText from the selection. So again, we might want to do something with that, so we can play with that. That's just something to think about. The other one, what we can then do is we can then say editor.edit. So this is where we can actually do stuff. So we can actually provide a function here that when the edit command is executed, we can actually do stuff. Okay? So the current thing, so let's do this in here as well, is that the current text is equal to, let's just use what we were doing before, we'll come back and play with that later. The current text is equal to that. What we can then say is if current dot is empty, so there's nothing there, then we can do something in there. Else, we can then do something else. So in this case, there's nothing currently selected, or there is something currently selected, and we want to replace it. Okay, so what we're going to do is take the current text, and we are going to replace it with what's in the alt text. Okay, so that's us replacing the text. And this one is edit.insert. So rather than replacing it, we're going to take the current text, or the current location, and we're going to add the alt text into there. Right? Now, that is currently complaining because there is this. This has got red squiggly line and saying that object is possibly undefined. Now, that to me is not correct because we should have returned from here. So I don't understand why TypeScript is telling me that this object is potentially undefined. Now, it could be because of the way that this is written. This function is a in-place function, that it's lost scope. But what this means is if I hit F5, it's not going to work. Or it's not going to work because it's going to tell me that there are errors. And that error is that this object is possibly unknown. But I'm also just going to say debug anyway just now because JavaScript is great like that. It can run with errors, so it doesn't actually care. So the test now is if I go hello world here, I should be able to say this is a test, right? And what that's now going to do is it's going to input that text into the current file that I have open, because I have a file open and it's put it into there. And if I change this to have some selected text and I run the same command again and I say that, then it's going to change this to that. Okay, so we now have the ability to take some input from the user and put it into the currently active file that's in the that's in the editor. So we're now at a point where we can start to do something with the images that we're playing with. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this. Now, the point that was actually raised last week as well, or what I'd said was, I'd identified that there was an extension out there in the Visual Studio Code Marketplace that does a lot of what we're trying to do. And that's the grabbing of the image from the clipboard and doing something with it. But it also does a bunch of stuff that I don't want, and that is providing a bunch of configuration for where that file is dropped onto the file system. There's lots of stuff I don't want or don't need. But the grabbing of the file, the contents of the clipboard is really something that I do want to do. And the question was raised about whether I would be allowed to reuse this code and what license is it licensed under. So if you go to the repository, which is here, and now normally there's at the top right hand corner here, there's normally an icon indicating what the license is of this repository, but unfortunately it didn't. It's not there. But one of the people in the chat last week noticed that if you scroll down, then there is a section here about license, and it says that this extension and source code are licensed under the MIT license. And when you click on that, this is meant to take you to a license.txt file in the root of this repository, but it's not there. So it is licensed under MIT, and it's stated there, but the license file itself is missing. So what I did yesterday, day before, was I actually created a PR into this repository to have it add that license.txt file using the MIT license. So I'm hoping that the maintainer will pick that up and merge it in so that that gets merged in, so it's clearer that the code in this repository is open source. Okay. So basically, there's no attribution required when it's an MIT license, but it's it's just good practice, really. If you're borrowing someone's code or using someone's code that you've taken as open source, it's just good to provide attribution back to that extension. So what I'll ultimately do is I will have a link to this back to this repository in my repository, and I'll highlight within the code that this was borrowed from this repository. Okay, so that's where we want to get to. So if we start looking through this code, then the source code for this extension is just in one big extension.ts file. So this is kind of what we've just moved away from into having the concept of having things broken up into services and individual commands. So we want to stick with that. But further down here, there is this command here, which is where is it? Save clipboard image to file and get path. So what this function is doing is it's doing exactly what it says. It's grabbing the clipboard image, it's putting it into a file, and it's returning the path to where that file has been stored. So the way that works is that there are these individual files that's doing all of that work for us. So there's one specifically for Windows, which is running a PowerShell script. There's one specifically for Mac, which is running an Apple script. And then there's one for Linux, which is running a shell script. So contained within those files are the things that we need to get that clipboard image into something that we can work with. So this is really the nuts and bolts of how this extension works, and this is the main thing that I'm going to lift out of this repository to make that work. Okay. There's a comment here from Kim. Can't you just use the edit argument in calling edit from the API docs? It looks like it should be a text editor edit class. Can't you just use the edit argument when calling? It looks like it should be a text editor class. So isn't that as in text editor edit is the edit, and is that what this is? Text editor. Instead of editor selection to edit selection. No, I cannot. No, because that's the action that's being taken. So it's not. It's a text editor edit rather than a text editor at that point, Kim. So no is the answer to that. I mean, this is I may need to come back to this to figure out exactly why TypeScript complaining. It's functional just now. I think it's just that either need to define something in addition, or handle better that it's an undefined. I don't think it's a showstopper for just now. But where I want to go with this is I want to start pulling in those resource scripts to start making those clipboard images available into my extension. Okay, so the way that works is if I go over to here and I go up a level and I go into people, maybe up another level and go into people, then go into here, cd into the, I've cloned that repository locally, and if I bring that up, then we'll see in that res folder, which is here, then there is this linux.sh file, which is using xclip to, for those Linux people in the chat room, I'm assuming that's the equivalent of grabbing the clipboard on my Mac or on my Linux machine. There is a pc.ps1 file, which is using PowerShell to grab those the image from the current clipboard, which is the way you do it in PowerShell. And there's another one which is Apple script, which is this one, which is doing something. I have no idea what it does, but I'm going to assume that all works, right? So if I go over to here and go into this PC, into the C drive, into GitHub, and into here, and into image VS Code, and then I have another one which is going to go to no, another one. Not going to get there yet. This PC, C drive, GitHub, people, this one, and then let's go into this res folder. So again, I don't necessarily like res. I might change that to be resources. So new folder called resources. And then into there, I'm going to copy the PowerShell script. I'm going to copy the Mac script. And I'm going to copy the Linux script. So those are the three things that are going to do the most amount of work for making that clipboard image and pulling it in, putting it into file, putting it into the current VS Code session that we have. So I'm going to close that one just now, and my other VS Code instance is this one. So I'm going to want to have a service. So in this new IOC container that we have, I'm going to want to have a service that's doing that work for us. So rather than having an inline function, I'm going to do that out with that. So right now we've got a message service here. So if we create a new one, and we're going to call this, how far do we want to limit this? We could limit this to clipboard. So we could have this as a clipboard service. We could have this as a file system service because we're kind of touching the file system. What do we want to call this service? We're going to call this service. Well, I'm going to go with clipboard to start. I might change my mind, but I'm going to go with clipboard service just now. And it's going to be a TS. So into here, let's just look to see what we need. So this is the message service. So we're going to want to do export class. We're going to call it as the clipboard service. We're going to do that. We're going to need this line, which is where InversifyJS comes into play. So let's go ahead and put that to there. I'm going to indicate that this is an injectable something. So this is something that we can inject. Injectable. And let's just leave that as that for the minute. And what we're going to do is we are going to inject that into this one. So in order to make that injectable, we need to define what the type is. So if we go over here to our types, then what we can say is clipboard service is of type symbol, and that's going to be clipboard service. Okay, and if we go back to here, we should now then be able to inject that. So now we can do inject again with types dot clipboard service, and then we're going to define that as a local instance called clipboard service, and that's going to be of type clipboard service. Okay, so with that done, it's already imported that for us. That was clever. So with that done, we've got one thing left to do, which is to hook it up in our configuration. So what I said before was, in order to have it from the container or be resolvable from the container, we need to add it into the container to start with. So in the same way that we did up here, we can then say container.bind, and again, using that types definition, .clipboard service. And now I'm going to bind that to a thing called clipboard service. And then you can then specify what sort of scope you want that to be available on. So within the context of an IOC container, you can say, normally you would want to say that something either lives for the duration of the application, in which case it would be a singleton instance, or you could have it give you a new one every time someone requests one for those things. So if you want to have something that only exists for the command execution, you could use the in request scope, and the singleton scope is the one that we're going to use, which is that's not the one I wanted. So it's going to be a single instance of that service across the entire application. So as soon as it's called, it'll be used again and again. Okay. So with that things in play, we should now be in a position to use that clipboard service within the context of this execute method. So we should be able to then run a function that we define in that service. But right now, we haven't defined that, right? However, if we go back over here and let's just borrow all of this just now. Let's just borrow all of this and we will tinker with it. So let's copy this over and let's put this into our clipboard service. Minimum. Oh, so Kim's putting a note in there. Should be mentioned, the developers of Inversify recommends to use a minimum of singleton instances. Not found a good way from that under VS Code though. Meaning that you should, well, I'm not sure if I fully understand what you're saying there, Kim. Should be mentioned, the developers of Inversify recommend to use a minimum of singleton instances. Oh, to not have too many is what you're saying, as in the preference being in request scope as opposed to singleton. Not found a good way to get away from that under VS Code. Though I would agree with that in terms of the you shouldn't use singleton bindings if you don't need to. Interesting. Okay, so that's something to. Okay. Is that just from a performance point of view, do you think, in having those multiple instances alive? Possibly. Okay, something to bear in mind. Okay. For now, for what I'm doing, I'm wholeheartedly, I'm all in the single instances just now. So what we need here is we're going to want a good. We're on the same page. So now that I have that clipboard service being available, I wanted to do something, and I want it to be able to grab the clipboard contents and save it to a file. So I need to create a function that will do that for us. Okay. So in this service, we're now going to say clipboard service get contents, and save to file. So in order for that to function, we're probably going to want a path to the file, and that's going to be a string. I got that round the right way. And then we're going to declare that as a function. So let's just take this whole thing and put it in, and let's have a play with it and see what we need to do next. Okay. So it's called image path there. So let's just change that to be path, which is what we defined it to be there. And then we're saying, so now it's doing, so this one here, so file exists and path.join, those are file system activities. So in the same way that we have segregated out our messaging, so our input and output from the user into a service, we should probably have a file system service that is used within the service. So a service can have a dependency on another service is what I'm getting at. So in the, here's one I created earlier, and in, it is on this one. So I already have a file system service on the other extension that I've created. So let's have a look at this one. So there's a file system service here that has a bunch of functions for combine path, check for existing, that sort of things. So I'm going to borrow all of this. So this is my file system service. Why did that not work? Copy. Why can't I see it? Let's try that again. Copy. So let's create another service here. A new file, and we'll call this the file system service.ts. and let's paste all of that in. So for that to work, we're going to need to define another type up here. So this is going to be file system service, whose symbol is going to be file system service. And then I'm going to need to add this in as well. Container dot bind, whose types is going to be file system. And we're going to bind that to this thing called file system. And I'm going to make that in singleton again. So I think I'm going to have to look into why that recommendation comes in based on what you've said there, Kim. But that could be one for a different day. So what we've done, or what I've done in the past, where I've needed this within another service, is it's the configuration service, and the other one that I've done those two things together. So let's just bring that example up. So if we go over here to the other extension that I've been working on, which is on this one, and there's a little bit more work going on in here for, say, this one. This one. Yeah. So let's just borrow this one. So into this thing that I'm calling the clipboard service, I'm going to want to borrow the file system service. So we'll just change this over away from the message service to be the file system service. Let's borrow that. Into there and into there. And then for that to work, it's going to need an additional include from here, which is inject. And then we're going to need a reference to the types. And then for this to work, we're going to need a reference to that one. Okay. So now within my clipboard service, I have access to this thing called the file system service. So now I should be able to do this dot file system service dot combine, which is that one. And then this one I'm going to have to come back to because I don't think I've got one for that, but I think I've got an exists. I do. So that is here. Well, that's for a directory exists, so have I got one specifically for that? Called it directory, but this is not specifically a directory, but let's give it a try anyway. So this is going to be this dot file system service dot check for directory exists. So spawn is one that I haven't played with yet. So I haven't got an abstraction for that yet, but we'll come back to that. So this is just going to be path. And then logger.show error message. So we have an abstraction for that in the form of our message service, which I have just removed from here. So let's put that back in. So this is going to be inject types dot message service, and that's going to be a local instance called message service, which is going to be a type message service. So rather than do logger dot that, we can do this dot message service dot show error, I believe. This, oh, hold on, that's in a, oh, this is not longer this. Okay, so up here, this is this, but this is not this. And this is JavaScript playing havoc with scopes. So because I am on a on function here, this is in the context of the promise, if that's the closure on this on function, as opposed to my current context. So what I tend to do in these situations, it's probably not the right way of doing it, but I have this concept of setting a thing that I refer to as the context equal to this, right? And if I borrow this, so rather than use this here, I'm going to use context, right? And then in the closure here, I'm not going to use this anymore. I'm going to use context. And because we've set context equal to this on the outside, it then has access to that member variable that we want it to. Okay, so I am curious if this is the right way of doing things, or whether there is a better way of doing it. But for now, I'm going to go with it because it's worked for me in the past. Manfred's laughing. I'm not sure if that's a good laugh or a bad laugh, but he might come back with some more comments as to what's going on there. So what else have we got going on here? This is a path.join, so this is going to be our this, or let's just continue with context. Context dot file system service dot combine path. That wants to be a path. Okay. ActionScript.on, so all of these are my spell checker kicking in, I think. So this doesn't like the ActionScript. I'm going to say that let's just add that to the dictionary so it gets rid of all of those error messages. Spawn, we know about, we need to find out what spawn is. So it's going to be path. That's going to be a spelling check, so let's add that into here. So Manfred, I should quote Manfred at this point. Manfred's saying is, everything in JavaScript that doesn't blow up is fine with me. I like your thought process there. I think I can get on board with that. So we're getting there. So this dot file system service dot combine is going to be that. That's going to want to be. I probably should have just called my variable image path rather than path, and it would have been happier. This is going to be our context dot. I should have not used this again, should I? Message service dot show error. Where did I use this? I want to use this to be context. Then this one here is going to be context dot message service dot show error. So there might be some questions regarding why are we doing all this work in terms of this IOC container, but one of the main things that it brings with it is the ability to quite easily start testing these things to make sure it's doing what we want it to do by directly coupling this service to something like showing a message box or getting some input from the user. That's inherently untestable. I know that there are things you can do with like monkey patching in JavaScript that makes those things testable. But by declaring it as a dependency, you can kind of then talk about mocking that dependency and testing that dependency in an easier way, rather than having to instantiate everything and have everything working. You can look into stubbing those out using some other frameworks that I know that are out there. So this context is my message service. So I'm going to say show information there. And then path is here is path. And then we're getting close, I think. So the only thing that I can see here is I called this folder resources rather than res, and then resources, and then the last one, there must be another one, which is here, resources. Okay. So I need to find out what this spawn is. So where did that come from? Spawn came from this code here. So spawn is coming from a child process. So child process is something that's going to need, I suspect that's something that's going to be needed in our package.json file. So let's have a look in our package.json file to see if there's a thing called interesting. Interesting. Is it just going to know about it? Is child process something that comes out of the box? Let's give it a try. Let's copy this. And we're going to put this up into, put this in here. So that should get rid of our spawn error. So these are all just typos. Let's just get rid of these. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to look at them without thinking that something's broken. Yeah, that's what was going through my head as well, Kim. I know I've used it on the chocolatey extension for Visual Studio Code. I remembered that I'd brought in a package for it, but I must have misremembered that. So let's get rid of all of these. E.code. That's something I may have to ignore because E is there. It's just as to whether it's got a code value. So E.code. I'll worry about that one later because it's in the same boat as the other one. So this CB. What is CB? CB over here is, oh, that's the callback. So in the way that this is written, there's a callback which is giving back the image path, and it is giving back the image path from script. So that's the image path that was passed in and the image path that was returned. So what's the difference there? Image path is what was passed in. The data image path from script. Is that the actual data? Well, let's just do that, what Kim's suggesting there. So he's saying that. Ah, look at that. I feel better now, but yeah, this feels a little bit cheap. Let's. We'll go back and fix that later, maybe. Let's just get rid of them just now. Is that them all? Okay, so this callback is data.toString.trim. Is that the actual? Is that like the? Is that the base 64 encoded content of the image? Standard out buffer. I wonder. Okay, let's just match this. Let's match the original signature just now, which was this, and we'll just see if this works, and then we'll come back to it. So what we said was that this thing here is a path, and then CB. Yeah, I'm not sure if I like CB. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I'm going to need to rename that. I don't like CB. I'm going to call this a callback because that's what it is. So that should, in theory, be something that we can now call, right? Oh, there's another. Let's just fix that one while we're here as well. Add that to the dictionary so it goes away. And let's see what happens, shall we? So we can see this being called. So save clipboard to image and file is being called to here. And then the callback is then doing something. So let's just see what we get back, shall we? So if we go, we've now got a clipboard service, and we can do something with it in our hello world command. So in here, we can then say this dot, if we injected the clipboard service, we have. So we've now got a clipboard service that should have a function called get contents and save to file. And that's going to want a path. So this is one of the things that actually I don't necessarily like about or want in the extension that I'm creating here, is that it's actually saving it to a temporary file before it can do anything with it. Now that's fine, but I also kind of want that to kind of be behind the scenes a little bit, because ultimately I store the files on an Azure blob storage. So I don't really need them on my local file system. So what I've been debating about in my head is whether I want to have I want to actually keep those files local, or whether I only want them to live on my Azure blob storage. So for now, let's go ahead and create a folder that we can do stuff with. So let's just have a folder. Did it create a folder? I bet it put it into source. No, it didn't. Let's create a folder called temp images. So that's where I want it to go, right? So temp images here is, I'm going to hard code other crap out of this for now. Excuse my French, right? So in here, we're going to want to do that, and it's going to want a path for the image. So I'm going to give that a string, and that string is going to be that, and I'm going to call it here as test.png. Okay. And then in here, we're going to want to do, I'm going to close that out, and semicolon at the end. So what do we get back from this? So he was getting back something saying that there was no image, and then if there is something, he's then rendering that to file path. So it is taking, interesting. So it's, let's maybe just look at what we get back, shall we? Let's just do let's just see what we get back here. Let's do, can I get this dot message service dot show information, and let's just give it, let's just see what it brings us back, shall we? So we've got image path, and then this dot message service dot show information, show error, maybe show information, which is going to be this thing called image path returned by script. Let's just see what it gives us back. And because we can, let's just set a breakpoint there, and let's see what happens. So we've got an error there. That's fine. That's the one we know about. So let's just hit F5 here, and we're going to say debug anyway. Right, because right now I don't think I have anything in my clipboard. So let's run this and run that hello world command, and let's just give it a name of Bob. Now what have we got back? So image path is completely broken because we haven't escaped our backslashes. That's fine, and it's giving me a tab in the file name, and in here it's got Windows PowerShell copyright. That's the output from the profile of PowerShell. Let's try that again, shall we? Let's first of all fix this so that we'll correctly escape our backslashes. So that is that. Let's then fire up. Let's test our clipboard to see if we've got something in our clipboard. Print screen. MS Paint. No. I had issues with this before. I'm going to do one thing over here. I'm going to do Choco install screenshot to give me a something to help with the grabbing of a clipboard image, or grabbing a section of the screen anyway. And let's use screenshot for that purpose. Yep, love screenshot. I'm going to close it off though. So now that we've got screenshot there, we should be able to say, okay, that right click here or press print screen. Beautiful. So I'm going to say right click here and I'm going to grab a region, and I'm going to grab this region, and then I'm going to say copy to clipboard. So now in theory I have an image on my clipboard, which I do because that's went into MS Paint. So now if we go back into Visual Studio Code, let's see if we run that. What happens if we run that again? Debug anyway. I'm going to say hello world. Give it a name of Bob. So now our image path is correct. And now it's still got what's it doing there? Let's have a quick look to see if we forgot something over here. Oh, is that path still correct? Oh, hold on. So we're going from this service here. We're going up too many folders, I think. I think the folder structure was slightly different. So I'm going to give it that, which means that this is going to be wrong as well. And so this is going to be wrong. Okay, let's try that again. Debug anyway. And F1 into hello world. Give it a name of Bob. And then what have we got? Ooh. Okay. So does that mean in my folder here, in my test images, still don't have anything. But that's fine, I think. It's returning something, but I wasn't necessarily expecting that. But it hasn't actually rendered it. It hasn't actually rendered it into the file system, because that's what this function was doing. What are you sending me there, Kim? Am I going to click on this JPEG? What are you doing? Oh, this could be dangerous, people. Open URL. So Kim has just sent me this. 99 little bugs in code. 99 bugs in the code. Take one down, patch it around. 127 little bugs in the code. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. But this there's no image in the clipboard. Fine. So image path is this dot render file path, editor document language ID, this dot base config path image, yada yada yada. Or hold on, did it actually do something? I just need to refresh it. No. Let's have a quick look at something else. Clip images. Images. Check the path. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. C, GitHub, get13, clip image VSCode. Oh, temp images. Hold up. Hold on. Oh, look at this. Test.png. What's in here? Paint. I don't care. Oh, look at that. Okay. So let's fix that one so that it's in the right place. So let's do test images there. And let's go ahead and delete this. Okay. And let's do that test again. Thank you for that. Who was that? That was Manfred. Check the path. Absolutely, we should have done that. Debug anyway. So let's do this. And let's say hello world. Bob. And that's now got things in test images. And if we go back to here, then in our test images folder, which is here. Oh, what did I test? Oh, temp. Referee. One's called test images, one's called temp images. Let's try that again. Let's run that again. One more time. Debug anyway. If we get to this point, I'm closing the. If we get this working, I'm gonna call it quits for the night because we're getting close. So now we've got something hopefully in test images has now got a test.png. Look at that, people. There we go. Right. So what that should allow us to do now is we could start to formulate what we're actually trying to achieve now. So we've now got this thing in here. So really what we want to do is take this part. Let's take this out of here. Cut this out. I wanted that. I wanted all of that. Let's take all of this. And then let's put this into here. So the alt text is what we have before. So we are going to insert, let's start formulating this thing. So the kind of thing that we want is, it's what, exclamation mark, that, how do you do an image in? I can never remember this. I always have to Google it. Markdown syntax for an image. Basic syntax. This is why I want this extension, because I never remember how to do it. Images is blah and then the path. So we want this, right? So we want it to be like, we want it to be of the format like that, right? So this is going to be our alt text. So the question in the chat there is editor.selection. So this, what I was showing here was what could be done. I haven't actually done anything with it yet, but what you're saying is just doing that. Absolutely, that should work. The reason that this, or the extension that I'm kind of borrowing from, it actually has the concept of using the selected text to provide the alt text. So let's say that differently. If I do this and say, this is my description, then what the current extension does, if I do that and then say hello world, it wants to then use what the selected text is to become the alt text for the image. Now, I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to have it input in the dialog box here. So I was just showing what could be done with the editor and its selection. But you're absolutely right that in terms of what we're showing here, this is actually all we need. So we're actually not using this just in a minute. So let's just to clean that up. So what I want to be able to do is I want to put my alt text in here. So that's going to become a alt text, and then this path here is the path of the file. So we know what we want. I just need to figure out how to do. I like that you're learning things from me, Manfred. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that you do anything with that, but I appreciate the sentiment there. Looking forward to the final extension. Got to go. Okay, no worries, Manfred. Talk to you later. So what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to make a string out of it. And I think that this is what this render file path is doing. So let's maybe just have a look to see what was going on in there. No, I'm not editing that. I want to edit that. It opened the feedback hub. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to say render file path. So it is doing lots of stuff. Interesting. And this is where it gets into the muddy water of moving files to different locations and all that sort of stuff that I'm not necessarily interested in. Really what I'm interested in is this part, I think. So the prefix here is prefix, image file path, and suffix. So where's the prefix coming from? Prefix is that, and the suffix. Oh, so he's handling, or this extension author is handling whether it's a markdown file or whether it's an ASCII doc file. I don't use ASCII doc, so I don't necessarily care about that. So I don't think I need to worry about that part just now. But what we do want to do is result.replace. So let's just use something like this with image file path as the prefix and the suffix. And we'll just manipulate this slightly more. So the editor.edit is, what do we want to do? I want to get this finished so that I can go to my bed, is where I want to get to. Can't find name prefix. Image file path. I say we don't necessarily want to worry about all of this just now. I just want to replace the suffix with that. I just want to insert. I know exactly how I do. I want to do a string.format. Anyone know how to do a string.format in JavaScript? Because I don't off the top of my head. String.format TypeScript. Let's see what comes up here. I mean, I could hack it. I could put it together quite quickly. Okay, so this actually will let me do what I want to do by the look of it. So if I just say that the let prefix equal, so the prefix is that and that, image file path and the suffix. So here, let suffix equal that. And then the image file path is just what I've got back, which is this thing. Copy. There. So that gets me open bracket with that. Really a middle. This is really bad. Let's just get it working. I'm all in just to get it working now. So that's that. Suffix is going to be that. So in here we have a middle. And that needs to be there. That needs to be there. So we've got our prefix and we want our alt text is going to go in the middle here. So what is our alt text is there. So this is a fairly horrendous string.format essentially. So what we want to do is take this and put this into here and put this into here. So what we're saying is the prefix, which is the first, it's going to be our exclamation point and the square bracket. Then we want the alt text to go in. Then we want the closing bracket and the open curly bracket. Then we want the path to our file, and that would work too. Sure. Let image path equal. So you've just shortened that really. So let's just. So you've just moved. So in fact, I'm going to leave it with the prefix in case I come back to thinking about whether I'm going to do the ASCII doc or not. So in theory, if I do this now, and I say here, hello world, and we're going to call it, this is a test. This is a test. Then what we should get back is, oh, where did my extension development host go? Here. This is a test and no image. Oh, it's lost the clipboard. It's lost the thing that we put into the clipboard. Okay, so once more. So let's get screenshot up again. Screenshot region, capture region, this one, to clipboard. F1, hello world. This is a test. I'm going to take this breakpoint out and I'm going to go back to my extension development host. Then we've got this thing, okay. Then if we go into here and we preview that was the wrong button. Oh, it feels so close. Test image, test.png. See. Let me just check this to see if this works. Test images. Huh. Have I got that round the wrong way or something? It's not the square brackets first, is it? File? Oh, maybe. I mean, this is not a huge deal because ultimately where I'm going to render it from is not going to be local to the file system. It's going to be in a URL that I get back. But still, I don't know, this would still need C:, wouldn't it? No. No. File. Is that not what I've got? File. C, GitHub. Is that not what I've got, Kim? I thought that's what I've got. Two backslashes after file. Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah, I had the same thought, Kim. But I'm also not too concerned because ultimately this is not how it's going to work. It would be nice to see it, but it's not the end of the world that it's not there. So there's a little icon saying, no, that's not it. Yeah, not the end of the world. But for now, so I mean, the main part of this was today's one was to be able to get the image from the clipboard, which is what we've been able to do. Do that in a way that is segregated from all the other dependencies. So we've used a dependency injection container, inversion of control container, to make it so that everything outside of the commands is done outside in a way that could be testable, and make use of those in what we're rendering to the screen. So we're very close. What I think we want to do is kind of let's just close this out. So this was for from our issues perspective. Which one have we got? I think we closed that one out. Yeah, we're finished with that one. Close issue. Labels. This one is going to be an improvement. Strictly build related. Let's put build on. Build instead, sorry. So we're closing that one out. And the issue that we had here was switch to that, and then we want a new issue, which is to grab clipboard contents. Grab clipboard contents and create file. This is going to be a feature, and a milestone is on there. And so this is going to be grab clipboard contents and upload file is where we're ultimately going to put it. Upload file. So submit that as a new issue, and this is going to be 12. So let's just go ahead and let's just add some commits here so that we can close this out. Maint, which is going to be adding spell checker exemptions. So that's what we're doing in the settings. So JSON file. This, let's just do these as individual. So this is use resource files. Let's just call this not use. This is resource files for collecting clipboard contents. And we're going to say in here, borrowed from here. So this is kind of part of giving credit back to where we borrowed this from. So that's in this project. So let's go ahead and copy that. And we'll add in at linux.sh that AppleScript and that PC. Go ahead and commit that. We don't necessarily want to check in that test.png, so let's take that out. And then this is going to be gh12 basic implementation of getting clipboard contents. Still some work to be done here, but proof of concept works. Let's go ahead and commit that. Say yes, and let's get that pushed up so that we know where we are. So this is CD, up a level, CD into get 13 and the clip image. And then let's just git push origin. Okay, so all that's checked in and we're ready to, or what's that? Oh, because we've now got, we did a pull request. This is why you should always work in branches. Git fetch origin, git rebase origin develop, and then git push origin. That should let us put it at the top. Okay, we did. Okay, so we've done kind of what I set out to hoped to complete as part of this today's stream. So we've now been able to grab all of the clipboard contents in a way that is segregated, manageable, testable, all those things. So we've got this clipboard service that the clipboard service is the kind of main worker that's doing all of the stuff that we need to do, which is to grab those clipboard content and to return a file. So what I need to work on is whether or that file wants to exist in the file system or not, or whether we can read that into a buffer and return just the file contents. But that really, the answer to that will be dependent on how the upload to the Azure blob storage works, because uploading to Azure blob storage may take a file path, or it may take a basic default encoded string that is the file or the image. So we need to look into how that works. But all of that is going to be for another stream. For now, I think that's it for tonight, because I need to wind this down a little bit. As a note to those that are still in the chat, the next stream will likely be on a Friday lunchtime. So I may continue with this, starting to look at the other side of this, which is to upload the actual content to Azure Blob Storage, or it may just be a refactoring of what we've got here, because right now it's still called hello world command. We kind of want that to be called something a little bit more in line with what it's actually doing. So there might be some tidy up work there. There's still some CI stuff that I want to do here in terms of adding things like the Mergify service that we spoke about. There's some missing things in terms of best practices for GitHub, which in terms of having a contribution document, all that sort of stuff. So there's a few kind of side things that need to get done. As with most projects, it's not always the most exciting stuff, but it does need to get done. So that's what the plan is going forward. So I hope that this was of use. I hope that this was at least showed you a couple of things. I know Manfred's taken at least 2 learnings away from tonight's stream. One was the saying that I'm going to hard code the shit out of this, which is what we definitely did do. And I forget what his first learning was. But at least someone's getting something out of this stream, so that's good to hear. If you do have any feedback about any of this, feel free to reach out. The best way is probably via this live stream repository that I have up in GitHub. This is where I'm kind of keeping everything regarding the stream going, including the upcoming streams in terms of what I'm planning on working on, but also this issues list here. So if there are any things that you want to see on the stream or have covered on the stream, then feel free to add an issue on here, and I can look into doing that. So the one that we're currently working on just now is kind of this one that was suggested by Kim, actually, which was creating a new extension from scratch. So it was kind of implementing a new extension from scratch, adding in things like Inversify, which I've just noticed it was on there. He edited this. Interesting to see that I hadn't actually noticed Inversify on there when you created this issue. So that's good to know. So yeah, feel free to add an issue if you want to have you've got an idea for what we should cover. But for now, Oh yeah, okay. So thank you for that. So the other learning from Manfred was that red text in a CI build is completely fine. I didn't actually say that, or if I did say that, that's completely out of context. That's not actually what I meant. I said that specifically that red text on a CI server that is at var when NPM is writing directly to the standard error output is completely fine, because it's just the way it works. So what was being referred to here was, oh no, that red text is bad. Oh, interesting. That red text is not in the right red text that I was referring to. This red text here, regarding the packaging of the extension, this is where it's running NPM directly, and however NPM writes to its output, it's writing it to the standard error output, and AppVer is showing that as red text when it's actually not an error. There's no problem there. So that was Manfred's second learning, or rather his first learning. But for that, I'm done. So like I say, thank you for staying with me. I hope that this was useful, and yeah. Might see some of you on, or some of you might join me on Friday. If not, this time, same time next week, we will likely be continuing with this as well. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. I shall talk to you later.